How you doing? Welcome to Thursday IB Nation Sports Talk, up and rolling. Sean Stiers with you. It's kind of a busy show. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina, with Notre Dame women's basketball, of course, getting ready for the ACC tournament. The Fighting Irish don't play their first game until tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, being Friday. If you're watching live, you know when tomorrow is. But if you're listening to the podcast after it's live, you might not exactly know when tomorrow is. But 5 o'clock Eastern time, Friday, the Fighting Irish will play either Cal or Virginia. And again, if you're listening to the podcast after the fact, you know exactly who it's going to be. But that game, as I speak right now, is just getting started here in Greensboro. So women's basketball coming up tomorrow. But today we've got a fully loaded show. As you might know, new Notre Dame general manager, Mike Martin, spoke with the media earlier today over at Notre Dame, as did both Rob Hunt and John Wagle. And John Wagle is the director of sports performance over at Notre Dame, and Rob Hunt is the football team's head athletic trainer. So we got a ton of spring football stuff. We got the official spring football schedule sent to us yesterday. So we're going to talk about what that looks like a little bit in terms of some practice viewings, blue gold game, and just kind of how the whole thing lays out. Because also when John Wagle and Rob Hunt spoke today, they talked about the availabilities of a lot of different guys like CJ Carr, Jeremiyah Love, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, wide receivers, on down the line, both full availability, limited availability, and kind of some individualized plans for some different players and guys who are going to miss the whole spring as well. Before that, though, Ryan Roberts, our old friend, is going to join me to talk some NFL draft combine. Jesse's going to be along with Rapid Fire later on. So Jesse will be with me for Rapid Fire. And as Tommy says, sounds like a fire show tonight. I hope so. I hope that's how it ends up being. But we're going to talk, NFL draft combine, of course, last week in Indianapolis. And so that's what Ryan and I are going to get to first at the start of the show. Now, I do feel like, as always with this crew, I have to issue the disclaimer that Ryan and I had to pre-record our segment. And not only did we pre-record our segment, we did it 2 different days in 2 different cities because of some technical issues that we ran into when we started this interview actually yesterday. So if you're paying attention, you will notice when this interview starts, you'll notice a difference in your screen. You will also notice at some point during the interview a difference in your screen. Hopefully the sound quality is what it needs to be. But if you're listening on the podcast, you won't know the difference until I kind of tell you the difference in the middle there. But again, ton of stuff, starting with NFL Draft Combine talk with Ryan Roberts. He was at the Combine last week. We're going to talk about a bunch of Notre Dame guys, a little bit of general Combine talk as well. And then after that, Jesse joins me for Rapid Fire, and we are going to get into a ton of Notre Dame spring football talk live right here in Rapid Fire. So away we go. Well, it's our old friend Ryan Roberts joining us once again here on IB Nation, fresh off last week's NFL Combine in Indianapolis. He, of course, is with A to Z Sports. You can see his background there, sharp little background that he's got. How you been, man?
Everything's good, Sean. It's we went through a couple weeks of kind of the dead period of content because there's no football to be seen or heard from for a little bit there. Luckily, we got the media availability to Chris Ash and Coach Sider recently, which was good for a little bit of a Notre Dame side of the bump. But right now, man, I'm just in NFL draft season. So mock drafts, analysis, and all that fun stuff that people hate, but they secretly love. They don't admit it to themselves.
I mean, it gets us through this time of year, right? Because, like you said, especially we're waiting for spring practice to start. You went to how many combines have you been to? I know you went last week.
Someone asked me this. It was either 5 or 6. I can't remember,
Wow.
to be
Okay.
honest. Those weeks are kind of a blur, man. A lot of late nights, a lot of content, and a lot of alcohol. Like it gets pretty hectic, to be honest. But it's I always love indie though. I really do. It's a great format for that type of event because everything is just so close together, right? Like you have the convention center, you have the skywalks and everything,
Yeah.
which is good for just
Right
like, if
downtown.
it's cold outside and snowing and all that type of stuff. Literally, I remember 2019 it actually did snow. It was pretty wild, but it's nice just kind of having everything close together and it's kind of a secluded environment. So a lot of people, I mean, literally, it's the only events that you have everyone, right? You have coaches, you have general managers, you have the scouts, you have the media members, you have the players, you have the agents, everyone in one spot. So it is the best time of the year if you want real intel, right? Like what are people actually thinking? What are they not thinking? What is the smoke screens that are out there? Like all those types of conversations.
Did you get in any coffee shop fights with any other media members or?
Hilarious, dude, because Ian Rappaport literally on the broadcast the next day, they were just making coffee jokes the whole time. I
I
was like, that's
know.
insane. They're like steering into it. I love it though. I love that they were steering into it. No, funny enough, dude, I know exactly the coffee shop. It is in High Velocity or the JW Marriott's literally
Okay.
upstairs is where this altercation happened. I wish I would have seen it, but unfortunately I did not get eyes on that situation.
It was hilarious. And they actually, he was on again, he's on NFL Network on Good Morning Football pretty much every morning. And they brought up coffee again today. And he basically said Ian Rappaport is powered by Dunkin'. So he said he's a Dunkin' guy.
What a good just like sponsorship opportunity, right? Like if
Seriously.
I'm a coffee shop, I'm like pumping it into Ian Rappaport or even George Schultz for that matter. I mean, they both have big followings, so like send them some sponsorship opportunities,
I
man.
know. I know. So there's usually, seems like there's usually a lot of buzz on, at least one or two or, however many guys coming out of the combine. Feels like, I don't know, maybe I missed it. Was there anyone who was really, kind of causing a stir down there last week?
You mean from Notre Dame side or just
Well,
from the
just
general
just
side?
in general, like like even big picture, it doesn't seem like there was any. There wasn't like what's his name, the Texas wide receiver last year with the 40 time, and
Oh yeah, Worthy,
Xavier
Xavier Worthy. Yeah.
Worthy, yeah. I wanted to
It
say
was.
Watts for obvious reasons, but I knew that wasn't right. So
I mean, there was a little bit of a quarterback circus. They had literally had Cam Ward and Shador Sanders like two podiums over from one another, going at the same exact time, which was hilarious. So like you just see two big crowds, and then like there's some podiums that didn't have a single media member at these poor prospects, like wanting to get interviewed
ugh,
here. But so like a little bit of a quarterback circus from like the testing perspective. There were some great testers, but unfortunately, we were let down by a couple. I remember it was the Texas duo of Jadon Blue, who's the running back, and then
right,
the wide receivers, Isaiah Bonds. They both predicted they were going to break the record that Worthy got. So they were basically saying that they were running 4.2 or 4.2 flat or faster. And I think one ran 4.38 and one 4.4 flat. I'm just like, in a vacuum, those are really cool times. Like they're really good times. But you cannot say that you're going to run 4.19 and then run 4.38s. Like that is just not how that works, man. Like that is a major disappointment. So it was a little bit more like those weird backstories, the kind of
yeah.
fun times, I guess.
Well, you bring up testing, and we were kind of talking right before we started. I thought it was really interesting. Let's start with Riley Leonard because
Hmm.
he threw,
Yep.
but he didn't do anything else. And I was a little surprised by that simply because this is a guy who, like, if you watch film, yeah, I mean, it's obvious, the guy is maybe, if you want to, I'll use my air quotes, deceptively fast. I felt like you're Riley Leonard, you run a good 40 time because there are obvious, deficiencies, with the overall game. What did you think of the fact that he didn't do the 40, didn't do any of the testing or anything?
I think it was a missed opportunity, to be
I
honest.
felt so
Vince
too.
was actually texting me about this, Sean. I think the same day the quarterbacks tested, and I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, I understand if you want to focus on just being a quarterback, and if Riley Leonard was a first round NFL draft pick, I totally get it, man. Like, you don't want to hurt yourself. You just do what you do. You don't even have to throw. Like, just be there and all that type of stuff. But I'm like, Riley Leonard at this point is a day three dart throw, right? And one of his
Right.
biggest selling points is that he's a great athlete. I mean, like he literally ran his last year at Duke before the season. He ran 4.5 something for scouts, right? So like he would have ran well at the combine, and he's a former basketball player, so you have to think that he would have had some crazy vertical and done all those types of things. So I
Exactly.
under I understand wanting to focus on being a quarterback and throwing the football. Like I understand that completely, but also you're a great athlete. Like, so I would steer into that. Like, steer into being a great athlete. That's a selling point for a team. Like, you want to make a roster, you want to make sure that you're on a team consistently throughout the duration of your career.
Yeah.
Use one of your biggest selling points to your advantage. So it's kind of a funky year because I think we do have to give some. We have to give some credence to the fact that some of these players just played the longest college football season in the history of the world, right? So they just played 16 games. I understand that some don't want to test because they've had limited opportunities to rest their bodies, then get into the training shape that they want to be to run fast and jump high. I totally get that. But Riley Leonard, by all accounts, seems to be pretty healthy. I wish he would have tested because I do think that that would have turned some heads and continued to understand that, like, hey, this might not be an NFL passer right now fully, but he is certainly an NFL athlete without question.
Right, because it feels like we've had this conversation with a guy like Marcus Burton, for example, on the basketball court, when he
Yep.
went and tested the waters last year. Like if his size is an obvious, it works against him. So like if that's what you have to overcome, you have to stand out in some other area. And we know that
Absolutely.
Riley Leonard stands out in other areas. And like you said, it just feels like a huge missed opportunity, for him to show the world and show all those people down there that, because this is a great athlete. But I mean, it seemed like just from the Notre Dame perspective, I mean,
Mhm.
Mitchell Evans was the only guy who did do the testing down there of all. I mean, was that basically,
Yeah.
one, is the long season the reason why, in general most of them didn't? Two, do you have an idea, like when it comes to pro day, do you think that they're going to do all that stuff when it comes to Notre Dame's pro day here in a few weeks?
It's a great question. It's not a Notre Dame centric conversation because we're just seeing more and more guys kind of opt out of testing just because of that longer season and just because honestly they don't have to, right? Like they would rather be in an environment that they can control, which is the pro day, and be in a track that they know, be on a field that they know, have more time to train. Like there's a lot of reasons that people choose not to test at the combine. For Notre Dame, I like Bo Collins said that he's going to test fully at the combine at the pro day, right? And you expect him to. Riley Leonard's going to have to test in some capacity. I mean, there might be a couple tests that he chooses not to do for X, Y, and Z reason, but he's going to have to test. Riley Mills is not going to be able to test, obviously, unless he has some miraculous comeback here, right? Like he's not going to be able to test. I expect
Yeah.
Howard Cross to test at least in some capacity. I know he's still kind of getting back from that ankle injury and everything, but I do expect him to do some things. Luckily for Mitchell Evans, and by the way, I thought Mitchell Evans looked pretty good. Like I didn't expect him to run like a super fast 40 or anything like that, but I thought he looked smooth. Like he looked good, and his body looked good. Like he looked healthy for the first time in probably a while, which was
Yeah.
good to see. But the good thing for him is he can just go to the pro day, do some field work, talk to scouts. That's it. Like he doesn't have to retest
Got
if
his
he chooses
testing
he doesn't
done.
want to retest.
Yeah.
Like he just doesn't have to. The big one, and we saw Jack Kiser on the fields, but we didn't see him test. So we'll see Jack Kiser test at the pro day for sure. The big one though is Xavier Watts because there are still some I don't call them concerns. There are people that want to see just how athletic he is. Like they just want to see it in person. They want to
Right.
see you're a great football player. You have great eyes. You have tremendous instincts, outstanding ball skills. All those things are great. But when we're transitioning to the NFL level, it's a big bump, right? Windows get smaller. Half the
Hmm.
steps get very fast. So those types of things you want to make sure that it translates to the next level. I think that he has a chance to be a top 50 pick when April comes around if he tests just good. I'm not talking like stellar. I don't need Xavier Watts to go out there and run 4.4 flat, but if he can run 4.5 flats, 4.52 somewhere in that capacity, if he can just test well enough all around, I think he has that type of upside. So outside of Benjamin Morrison and Riley Mills, I expect everybody to test in some capacity when the pro day comes.
So real quick on Riley Leonard, he did throw,
Yep.
and it sounded like people were, fairly pleased with, what they saw from him. Pretty good showing. What did you think of what you got to see of Riley Leonard throwing the football down there?
I thought he was one of the better quarterbacks, to be honest. I mean, it was first and foremost, it was not a great quarterback group on both. Like there were two groups. I didn't think Tyler Shuck from Louisville. I thought had some moments,
So he
right?
was
Like
kind
Quinn
of in the
Ewers
B
had it.
group, basically.
Yeah,
Is
Quinn Ewers had a some okay moments. Jalen Milroe even had some moments, right? I mean, surprisingly, like one of the better or more consistent passers. I wouldn't say better throwers. One of the more consistent passers was probably Brady Cook from Missouri, which is like, that's not great. If that's one of the better standouts, you know. So I thought Riley looked pretty solid overall. Here's the thing with Riley. Riley is not. He's a gifted thrower, but he's not a natural passer, if that makes sense, right? Like he can drop his arm angle, he can throw from different platforms. He has some natural arm talent, but he's been a street baller basically all his life. So like he is way more comfortable just kind of being a little bit unorthodox and not hitting traditional drops and fading off his back foot at times. Like he doesn't have comfort as a passer overall, but I do think there are still some skills there. It looked like from the training that he's been doing, I'm not sure who he's been training with, it looked like he was more comfortable just kind of on his feet, keeping his timing good, rhythm, base was solid. So I thought he showed some good stuff. Obviously, again, he's still a work in progress from an NFL passing perspective, but it was nice to see that he did come prepared, because if he wasn't going to test, he had to do a good job throwing the football, and I thought he did look pretty good for the most part throwing the ball.
And again, like you go back to the fact that he didn't do any of the, like obviously they measured his height and, his hands and those kind of things, but not doing any of the testing. Like it feels like you could really, like make some teams say, well, he's not the perfect thrower, but we know he can run. And, look at how well he tested and all these, like it felt like those kind of things could really help him. Like, is it kind of a day 3 flip of the coin, as to whether or not he even gets drafted, do you think?
I think he'll get drafted. I think it's more in like the 5th, 6th round conversation. I think he's a day 3 dart throw at this point. So he has some things working for him. One, he does have a good frame. He's a very athletic kid. He does have some natural passing talents, just it's not nearly there from a developmental perspective. And he's in a bad quarterback class, right? And right or wrong, Sean, this is the most archaic thing of all time, but he's tall, he's white, and he wins, right? So like people look at that and they're like, yes, love that. What a winner. It's not actually
he's a poster boy,
trait.
right? Yeah.
It's not a quantifiable trait at all. Just be like, oh, he's a winner, but like NFL people love it. It's like that guy knows how to win games. Okay. He just won the most games in Notre Dame history. I know it's a longer season, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But 14 wins in a season is still pretty impressive, obviously, in 16. So
okay, so for those watching on the YouTube channel, I've magically teleported out of South Bend and into Greensboro, North Carolina. As you can tell, my backdrop is a little more bland right now. But Ryan, we were talking about Riley Leonard, and it seems to me like perfect fits for Riley Leonard when you look at him going, like to a professional team, to an NFL team. Buffalo, Philadelphia, Baltimore all seem like they would be perfect options for a guy like Riley Leonard because of the way their offense runs and who they have as their starting quarterbacks.
Sean, I can't tell you how many times I've mocked Riley Leonard to the Baltimore Ravens, like in the 6th rounds in this process. Like it's been at a high volume because I think the thing here is that like you don't want to be known as the running quarterback, right? Like you don't want to be known as the guy that is a better runner than passer. But if I'm Riley Leonard early in my NFL career, there has to be a sticking point, right? There has to be a reason that the team wants to keep you on the roster. And I think like a Baltimore Ravens where they're running, and they don't run Lamar quite as much as they used to, right? Like it's starting to go down a little bit, but they still run Lamar, zone read, power read, do all that type of stuff. The Philadelphia Eagles are the same. It's not quite the volume outside of like goal line situations for Jalen Hurts, but they do run him occasionally on some design quarterback stuff. And I think that you don't have to change the offense for Riley Leonard in Baltimore or Philadelphia. He can do those types of things. Yes, his passing still needs to take a step forward, but that rushing attack and that rushing threat, that gives you a sticking point on a roster that will allow you to develop. Without it, maybe a team won't want to develop you. Maybe you're just not gifted enough of a passer to want to develop that. But the fact that he does have that running ability is a sticking point to finding a roster on the next level.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about a few other guys here as well. Jack Kiser. I heard someone on the NFL Network say that basically he made a really good impression with his work at the Combine last week. Okay, you made a face, so I'll let you go. I think it was like his agility stuff, like the agility drills and things like that with the other linebackers, and like even some of the other linebackers that appeared seemed to to take notice. So what did you walk away from the combine thinking about Jack Kiser?
So it wasn't even my face wasn't even towards the field work. It was just the most like unsurprising thing of all time that Jack Kiser impressed people from just like a personal perspective, right? Could you imagine his interviews? He was probably just stellar.
Yeah.
He literally did an interview with me on my Notre Dame channel at A to Z where I was just like, this kid, like, he could run for president one day and it'd be like, all right, cool, man, bro, go do that. Like, you are one of the most impressive men I've ever talked to. I mean, because I almost called him a kid, but I'm like, I think he's like 24, 25 now, right? So like, I gotta start calling him a man at some point.
I mean, he's not much younger than, like a guy like Logan Wilson, for example.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But he is a very mature young man. He's very experienced, and he's a good athlete, right, too. So he'll go to the pro day and he'll do the rest of the field work that he has to do, the testing, all that type of stuff. But he is an impressive player. I actually was told by a NFL team that before the season, they had a priority free agent grade on Jack Kiser, but now they have a 5th round grade on Jack Kiser. So he has helped himself in a big way after this past year, showing that he could play inside, because that was the question about him, right? Like, he was a rover that would get tucked inside at times based upon different personnel alignments, but he was never played true inside linebacker on a full scale until this past year. So showing that he can do those things on top of the athleticism that he brings and the fact that he's a really good person and has great character, that was obviously he is going to continue to trend upward, and I would not be shocked if he doesn't go very early day 3, if not late day 2. Like, if he goes 4th round, I wouldn't be shocked. I think he's more in like the 5th, 6th round conversation, in my opinion. But overall, I think he could still continue to climb with just every part of his evaluation that we talk about.
So really, kind of somewhere in between where Maris Leofau and JD Bertrand went last year, like somewhere in that window, 3rd, 5th round kind of.
Yeah, I don't think that he goes quite as high as Maris, just because I think that people do want to bet on. And Maris actually did some decent things with Dallas as a rookie. Like, he showcased himself a decent amount. I
mean, he played. They played him to his strengths. It was still more, like pass coverage, pass rush, and those kind of things, as opposed to like pure inside, off ball run stuffing. Yeah, exactly. That's still kind of going to be the question with him, I think.
So I tend to think that he doesn't go as high as Maris, just because Jack does still have short arms. He has a shorter wingspan. Like, there are some limitations. He's not the most powerful dude of all time either. But I actually would bet right now that he goes a little higher than JD did, right? Well, JD was a 5th round pick, so I think he might go a little bit higher than him, just because he has a little bit more coverage upside. He's a little bit more athleticism overall. So I think he has helped himself tremendously that final year. That's like the premier example of going back for a 6th year and helping yourself to the highest degree. Like, Jack, I think, literally went from an undrafted free agent to someone that's going to get drafted in April.
Right. And I mean, obviously, a lot of people, like I mentioned, Logan Wilson, and with Al Golden going to the Bengals, I mean, like, that would seem like, like like Al Golden would want to get Jack Kiser in, if that's a possibility. Late in the draft, it seems like.
I have mocked Jack Kiser to the Bengals. I've also mocked Xavier Watts to the Bengals. Like, it's just so easy, right? It's like, Al Golden needs to turn that defense around. Like, there's a lot of holes in that defense. But so what better than to find a couple guys that he knows and that he's very comfortable with, obviously, and knows his defense.
So Howard Cross, like, great college nose guard, and obviously he stuck around as well. Still, obviously, on the light side at just 285 pounds, and they had him do some fullback stuff, which I thought was interesting at the combine. So what do you make of Howard Cross's NFL prospects at this point?
It's not to the level that I thought it could be before the season. Like, I think if Howard Cross had a season similar to what he had in 2023 again in 2024, and I know the numbers were relatively the same, but if you watched, it was just like, it wasn't the same impacts, right? Like, he didn't have a game in 2024 that was like his Duke game in 2023 where he just annihilated everyone. Like, he was very banged up. I think the biggest thing for Howard is, like, got to get him fully healthy. Like, you just have to, because for a kid that is that type, a little over 6'1", is 285 to 288 pounds, going to play somewhere in that ballpark, injuries are going to cause him to be unplayable is not the right word, but anytime that you are a little bit of an undersized player, when you are hampered by injury, you are very ineffective a lot of the times. And that's what he's kind of fighting against a little bit. Like, he's got to be able to keep himself in great condition and great shape and try to avoid the injury bug the best he can, because that's the best way that he's going to showcase his overall talents on the field. I think that we're talking more of a late day 3 kind of kid now, like a 5th, 6th, maybe 7th, like somewhere in that ballpark, just because he is undersized. He didn't have the best season, and now he's coming off, obviously that nagging ankle injury and the lower body stuff that he was fighting through during the course of the year. So he's on the downtrod a little bit, but I would still bet on Howard Cross, man, because it's very similar to Jack Kiser in the sense of that kid is a great young man. And
Oh yeah.
I think he's well grounded. And we lose the sight of this, Sean, sometimes I think of like we always just talk about what's on the film, and I'm a film guy, so like that's what I want to do as well. But the character matters, the medical matters. Like we're investing in men at the end of the day. You're investing in people, and I think Howard Cross is a great person. So I think he's still going to get drafted. I think it's probably a little bit later than we thought. I mean, I think there was a world that if he would have had a great season, he would have been fully healthy through this process. He may have been a 3rd or 4th round pick. Like he had a chance to be in that type of conversation. I think he's more in like the mid to late day 3 conversation now, just based upon the injury. But I think he'll still play. The fullback stuff's weird though. Like if I could just like go off on a tangent, it's weird. A couple of the undersized defensive tackles they also asked to do it. I have never once watched Howard Cross and been like, man, that's an NFL fullback right there,
Right.
man. Like, but there are some guys that I've done that with, right? Like I remember there was a D tackle from Wake Forest, Whitlock. I can't remember his first name, but literally he played in the NFL for a couple years at fullback. But I remember them saying like that's a fullback, and he was only like 5'11", like 255. I'm like, okay, I could see that. That makes sense. 6'1" and an 1/8 and 285 pounds. I don't know if that's a fullback. I don't think that works. So he's a D tackle to me, but it's just kind of a funny one that a couple of those guys were asked to do some fullback stuff.
I mean, especially for a nose tackle. I mean, he's there's some agility there, but like, do you see any future for him as a 3 technique guy, or if that was there, would we have already seen it at Notre Dame? Do you think?
I was actually very disappointed with Notre Dame in the sense of when you have Howard Cross and Riley Mills, I think that you should have mixed and matched a little bit more as far as maybe you're just playing more left rights than you are playing nose 3 tech, because I actually think Howard Cross is more of a 3 tech than he is a nose. I think he did what he had to do. I think he played his best that he possibly could at the point of attack, but his strengths are he's pretty flexible and he's a good first step, and he has the ability to be a penetration player. So I think he's a 3 technique on the next level. I don't think he's going to play like much 1 at all. Like I don't think he's a 0. Like I just don't think he's a nose on the NFL level. I think he's a 3 tech. So I think there is an interesting conversation if I'm an NFL team of like, hey, we like the player, didn't have a great 2024 season because of injury, but there might be something else there because he never really played that much 3 tech at Notre Dame, and we think he's a 3 tech. So I think that actually might play into his hand and play into his favor a little bit, the fact that I do think he has some upside at 3 technique, even though he was never asked to do it much at Notre Dame.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Yep. Mitchell Evans. People seem to love his gauntlet. Did he really did he help himself, do you think, down there in Indy?
I thought Mitchell looked pretty good. I thought he looked pretty good. I think first and foremost, he looked healthier than what he had during the season, which was good, especially early on in the season. He just did not look like himself. I think he was smooth, right? And I mean, he ran like 4.74 or 4.73, somewhere in that ballpark. I wasn't expecting Mitchell Evans to run fast. Like he's not a fast player. He's a coordinated, smooth athlete. That's what he is. And I thought he looked coordinated and he looked smooth. His biggest thing is going to be the medical checks. And I don't have any background on that, Sean, to be honest. Like, I don't know if the medical's checked out. I don't know how positive people are with the medical on that side. Like, that is pure speculation on anybody's part that doesn't have that inside information, right? So, based upon all the stuff he dealt with, I would find it kind of hard to believe that he had fully clean medicals. But, like, again, that's speculation, ultimately. Yeah. Where he ends up in this draft is going to depend on that. Because it's a good tight end class. But there is a middle tier of this tight end class that is kind of grouped together very closely, right? And the differentiator is going to be who's healthy, who has upside left, who's more versatile. And I think the thing that Mitchell Evans has in his favor is that Notre Dame asked him to do a lot of different things the last 2 years. Like you saw him split out in the slot. You saw him split all the way out wide at times. You saw him play inline. You saw him play as an H, motion across formation. Like he was asked to do a lot of things. So as long as he's healthy, I think Mitchell Evans is going to play in the NFL, and he's going to be a part, at least a top 2 to 3 tight end on a roster. I think that he is easily a top 2 tight end on a roster, if healthy. But that caveat is the biggest question because we just don't know what the long-term health is going to be for Mitchell, unfortunately.
Right. And another guy with obvious health issues is Benjamin Morrison. And he's an interesting one to me because we know he can play, but he had a shoulder going into fall training camp, after the spring last year. And obviously the hip surgery that shut down his season, not even midway through. So, like, how do you think, and I know, he still hasn't done any testing. He's going to do a private workout, I guess, in April sometime before the draft. But, like, how do you think, this is a guy with at least second round talent, if not even first round talent. But how do you think NFL teams treat him because of this, injury history, with a pretty significant one being the hip surgery that he had?
I think if we just had the film plus production and a clean bill of health, just fully, like there was no medical concerns, I think he is in the first round conversation for sure. I think right now he's a day 2 player because, look, my biggest thing that I want to see Benjamin Morrison improve on from 2023 to 2024 was play strength. I thought that his tackling wasn't great. I thought that he could do better, leveraging the wide receivers in the air, finishing at the catch point, like that type of stuff. So the shoulder injury was very concerning to me. Very concerning because I'm like, that was my biggest question. Like, I want to see his ability as a tackler and be a little bit more physical. And the fact that he had shoulder injury was a disappointing one. The hip injury, though, Sean, like, that's a completely different animal, man. And that, full transparency, terrifies me, right? We're talking about a position that hips are so important. The ability to turn and run, drive on the football, like all those types of things. I'm not a doctor, right? Like, ultimately, I don't know if you know this, Sean, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor.
Well,
but corners with a hip issue,
I mean, anyone with a hip issue, it's,
yes.
especially corners, especially.
Yes, I mean, because they're on an island, right? The turning and running is so important. Planning and driving is so important. Like, all these things, it's so vital to have flexible, and people make fun of it, but like oily hips, right? Like, he has to have really good hips. But it's true. I mean, it is like, that is so, so, so important. So with these two together, I'm worried that we could be seeing a little bit of a fall from Benjamin Morrison. Now, this could be a completely moot point if it checks out and people are not overly concerned about the hip. But I think there's a world that he could be somewhere mid to late day 2, more than early day 2. Like, if he fell to the late second or even into the third round, I wouldn't be totally shocked with these things kind of popping up, because there were some people that had concerns about him athletically even before the season started. And the fact that now he's dealing with these 2 injuries in a 12-month sample, it is pretty concerning, if we're being honest with ourselves.
All right. I wanted to ask you about Jeremiyah Love. Obviously, he's got another year of eligibility. But if J Love was in this year's draft, where would you rank him compared to some guys, the other running backs in this year's class?
I think he would be running back 2, probably behind Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. I think Ashton is going to go top 15, top 20 at least. He might even go top 10. Like, we'll see what happens. I think he's going to go somewhere in that ballpark because he just has so much production and contact balance and three down upside, all those types of things. I do think that Jeremiyah Love would be in that running back 2 conversation, though, with like a Marion Hampton out of North Carolina, just because Love is so unique, right? Like, he is so different of a player comparative to like a Hampton, for instance. Like, Hampton's a 220-pound bulldozer. Jeremiyah Love is a 210-pound freak of an athlete, right? Like, you could do so much with him. Yes, he ran for 1,100 yards. Yes, he has breakaway ability, but you can use him in the passing game. And he's an improved pass blocker. And the ability that he has to make people miss in tight quarters, but then also outrace dudes to the perimeter is special. Like, all those things are special. So I think he would absolutely be in the running back 2 conversation. And if he was, it's a first rounder potentially. I mean, there's talk about a Marion Hampton potentially going like pick, I think the Chargers at 21 or 22 or something like that, like in that ballpark. I wouldn't be shocked if Jeremiyah Love was a first round pick in this draft. And I do think that if he stays healthy, he has a chance to be running back 1 in the 2026 NFL draft and to be a first rounder in that cycle as well.
I think Cam Skattebo is so interesting. I mean, he's a guy that basically nobody knew who he was until November when Arizona State, emerged as a playoff team. And I don't know, if Arizona State does, as a team doesn't make that push and ends up in the play, is anybody talking about Cam Skattebo right now? Like, so what's like realistically, like what do you think of him, as a pro prospect? Like, because again, I think everyone has these very, just because of the story, it seems like. So is this like a legit pro prospect?
It is a great story because I believe he was a high school quarterback and was definitely a 0-star recruit that went to Sacramento State to begin. And he was a good player for Sacramento State, eventually transferred up to Arizona State. It's a really cool backstory. I'm not like,
no, I think you're in the same boat as me, because I think people have just fallen in love with him because of the way he looks. He plays hard and, all these different things. I still have a hard time seeing him as a legitimate, like maybe as a load carry, change of pace type NFL guy, but I don't know beyond that.
I think he's going to go higher than I think he will. So like I would draft him somewhere day 3 as a committee back because he's powerful. But I think that he's a better prospect than this guy. So don't there's layers to this conversation, but he reminds me a lot of Cody Schrader last year that came out of Missouri that like had a great year in the SEC, was SEC offensive player of the year and was a big reason that Missouri won 10 plus games in 2023. But then he goes undrafted, right? Because it's like, he's just not a great NFL athlete. Like he's just not. I think Cam Scatterbo is a better athlete than Cody Schrader was. I think he's a better player than Cody Schrader was. So he's definitely going to get drafted. There's no doubt. But like, I'd be more willing to draft him like top 150, right? Than like people trying to convince me he's a top 64 pick. Like, I don't think he's that type of guy. I think that there's a chance that he could go late day 2, somewhere in the 3rd round, because teams seem to like him to a high degree. But like, I personally would not be willing to draft him until day 3, just because I think that he is powerful. I think his short air explosiveness is pretty good, but like change of directions average, long speed is average. Like it's just a lot of average to him. Great college football player, great pro prospects. Not in my opinion.
That's what it feels like to me as well. Again, I feel like people have they've fallen in love with the story and the look and the feel and the whole thing, as opposed to, how that actually translates.
Someone said that he's going to be Peyton Hillis, where he's going to run for a random 1,000-yard season early in his career. Everyone's going to fall in love with him. He's going to be on the cover of Madden, and he's just going to kind of go off into the sunset in the next couple years after that. So
okay,
we'll see.
Yeah. Peyton Hillis, the rise and fall, right?
That's it, man.
It happened quickly.
They should do a 30 for 30 on that season for Peyton Hillis.
Like, oh, man.
Those crazy seasons. And then he's on the cover of Madden, and it's like, then you never heard from him again.
Seriously. Literally just disappeared into the nether. All right, man. I appreciate you doing this. A lot of great stuff. Is the combine, like where do you rank it among your, like combine or NFL draft? Like if you could go to one every year, would it be the combine?
Oh, it's combined by a landslide.
Okay.
It's not even close. I've actually never been to the draft, and to be honest, Sean, I have no wants to go to the draft. Like, I'd rather go to the All-Star games. I'd rather go to the combine. I would rather go to pro days than go to the draft.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't do it for me. For me, it's like I did all my work. Now I'm back. I'm kicking back. I'm just watching. I'd rather just watch at a buddy's house, or I'd rather watch at my house and have some people over to watch the draft. Like, that's more my bag than like being in Like, I don't want to be in Green Bay, Wisconsin this year. Like, that's not appealing to me overall. But
right.
Indianapolis every year, I talked about it a little bit with you, like in the beginning of this conversation. It is the only spot every single year, the only week every single year where everyone is there, man. Players, agents, coaches, decision makers, whether that be GMs, scouts, and the media. Like, everybody is in one centralized spot. And that's where you gain the most knowledge. And that's why I always love going to the combine, because it's not even about the testing. Like, I could watch the testing at home, right? I could watch the testing at home. It's being in Indianapolis and talking to people and hearing what to believe, what not to believe, and the 17% of things that you probably should actually believe at the combine.
If you want to do your job, you have to be there mingling and mixing and the whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right.
I've met so many great people at the combine. It's been wonderful over the last few years.
You can check out all of Ryan's stuff at A2Z Sports.com. Appreciate it, Ryan. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you.
The one and only Ryan Roberts. I had a hard time there getting the buttons in and out on the back end there. There's Jesse Stiers.
What's up?
How about you? I think you and Vince might have talked about this last week. NFL draft or combine? If you could do one or the other. You'd go combine too?
Yeah, Vince went with the draft because he's lame.
I don't think I would take the draft because the draft, and I think that I heard you say it, and I feel the same way. I'm only there, like I'm not going to be there covering it, like unless multiple Notre Dame guys are expected to go in the first round, and who knows, maybe within a couple of years that happens. But my interest, if I were at the draft, would primarily be in my own team, and you only get one pick. It's like by the time that's done, it's like who cares after that? You can only stand around and drink so many beers and jeer at the stage and Roger Goodell so many times. So I don't think I'd take the draft.
Well, outside of like rounds 1 and 2, I care, but I don't care. I think being there for rounds 1 and 2 are like those are your fun picks, like those are getting into the Ferrari or the Corvette or the Lamborghini, and you're like, those are the guys, like that's Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott. Like those have been some of the first round picks Zach Martin, the guy who just retired and wasn't all pro. Like those are the guys where it's like the flash and fun comes in the first and second round. And then after that, it's just, for the Cowboys, I guess it's more so than usual because they try to fill out their whole roster with the draft. But I know that those guys that go in the first and second round are likely going to be difference makers the next season.
You didn't go to the draft when it was in Cleveland, did you?
No, that I had just moved to Cleveland during that year.
That's what I was thinking. Michael, you were the first one to notice that I have new glasses. He says, love the Al Golden specs. Thank you. Got some new frames. Got some new lenses.
They look a little thicker.
Earlier this week. I don't know if they're thicker. They're a little different. I'm still getting used to them to an extent. It's like my old glasses were broken in, but I just decided that it was, I'd had them for like 3 or 4 years or something like that. So I decided it was time for a new look. Brian says you are 100% a Scataboo.
I appreciate the compliment. I just don't think his game is going to translate well to the NFL.
I really don't.
Everyone's big and fast and can tackle in the NFL, and
Yeah.
he made a living off of breaking tackles. And he's not exceptionally twitchy or fast at the end of the day either. So it's like I don't see him breaking away from guys, and I don't see him running over guys like he did in college.
Yeah, it's a lot different making that step NFL to college. Good luck to him. I mean, I'm
rooting against him.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I'm not rooting against him. When I watch him, I just have a hard time seeing how that translates to a consistent role in the NFL. Again, unless I was saying with Ryan, like a change of pace, platoon situation in the backfield, that kind of thing, so. Well, Jesse, there's only one thing I have to ask you. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire, and I love that the little rapid fire subtitle just shot onto my screen, baby.
Boom. We need to put some flame emojis next to the rapid fire. I think that would – that's right. Well, rapid fire is predominantly about spring football practice today. Notre Dame spring practice just a couple of weeks away, and there were some press conferences over at Notre Dame today. Got a lot of information with Notre Dame football's director of sports performance, John Wagle, as well as football athletic trainer Rob Hunt. New general manager Mike Martin spoke with the media as well. But we're going to start with the spring news because we got the full spring schedule yesterday. Now, we're not allowed to go into full details on this, but first practice, Wednesday, March 19th. It's going to run, of course, through Saturday, April 12th with the Blue Gold game at Notre Dame Stadium. Not a lot of media availability that we're going to get in terms of practices to watch. We're only going to get 2 of the 4-period viewing windows, 1 full practice late in the spring, and then the Blue Gold game. So 2 partial viewing practices, 1 full practice, and the Blue Gold game. That's it. So 4 opportunities in total. Jesse, question.
I get it during fall camp and regular season, but it's spring practice. Everyone knows what your base and defense and offense are. Like,
I'm a little surprised as well.
Like, what are we hiding here? And it seems like this spring is going to be even less kind of, I don't know what the best word to use here is, but I mean, they just came off the national championship. So it's not going to be an overly extensive spring by any means. And so,
right. And we're going to get into the details of that, like what we're actually going to get to see. It is a little weird, I think.
I don't know if it's because you got a new defensive coordinator, or if because of you're going to be deciding evaluating quarterbacks. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I don't know. For a team that's, coming off the national championship run, again, spring is very simple. I just thought that there would be more media availability than that.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that there might be at least one more, longer period in there, but that's what, because the other side of this, and I've said this before, when you limit the availability to the media, there's only so much that we get to base our opinions on. And Vince and I were talking about this either earlier this week or last week. What's going to happen when you get these short, partial practices? There are because this has happened before when we've had quarterback competitions and that kind of thing going on. There are other people on the beat who are going to watch these short windows and watch these quarterbacks basically go through warm-ups, go through some routes to routes to wide receivers on air, maybe some one-on-one stuff. Yeah. And then, they're going to make these definitive statements about who looks better, who looks worse, and who should be ahead in this derby. And, so that's what's going to happen when we're not able to see any other live reps beyond that. Other people are going to make definitive statements about that. They are going to, in many cases, be misleading. And then also what's going to happen is we're going to have to answer to other people's opinions based on, the minutia that they're seeing or not seeing, or that they think they're seeing or not seeing. And it's going to lead to, and then what's going to happen is that's going to be the lingering opinion that gets put out there that's going to carry over for the next 4 months until fall training camp begins, because we're not going to get to see as much. I mean, that's the downside of it. Now, whether that matters or not to Marcus Freeman and the football program, I mean, based on the schedule that we've got, apparently not, but that's what's going to happen.
So basically what you're saying is it's going to create problems that don't need to be problems.
Yes. At least for us. Now, John Wagle also said today they have not determined the exact number of practices that they're going to have.
Which is crazy to me.
Between 10 and 15 practices is what they says. It's kind of a byproduct of, again, we're going to get into some of the player availabilities in this in a little bit, but it's a byproduct of what he says is the unique and wonderful situation of reaching the national championship game. So they might just, get to a certain point and say, we're not going to have any more practices, or we're just going to have, a light workout, that kind of thing. Quality over quantity, I guess. I don't know. What do you think of this?
I think we're obviously approaching kind of a new realm in terms of the expanded college football playoff. So it is going to have an impact on spring games. And we've seen some spring games already canceled. I don't think Notre Dame needs to go that route. I think it needs to be kind of responsive to where your team is at in the spring. Did you make a long run in the season? Do you have lingering issues? Do you have a lot of young guys? Do you maybe have more older guys? So I would say it's more about quality than quantity. At the end of the day, you want your guys to learn. You don't want to just be out there to be out there. And so if you can teach the young guys, get the experienced guys healthy, or maybe some of the guys that have some lingering issues healthy, work on the strength and conditioning, stay in peak performance, that kind of stuff. Definitely. But I think, and we'll talk about this here a little bit more too. I don't necessarily love the idea of certain guys have to practice, or not everyone's practicing the same amount of days, essentially. And I think that's where it can maybe get a little bit dicey, because you're kind of creating a natural hierarchy of, well, is this guy too good enough that he doesn't have to practice? Or, what's the situation here? This guy's practicing 15 times in camp, and this guy's only practicing maybe 7 or 8 times.
Well, and again, like we're talking about the abbreviated schedule and all that, and Werewolf says, I bet it's because there will be a lot of players taking days off, and Notre Dame doesn't need the media blowing something out of proportion. I don't know about that. But I mean, again, we're going to get into specific guys who are going to have partial schedules and the guys who are going to be out for the entire spring here in just a moment. So, I mean, we're all going to go in with the understanding that not everyone's going to be out there every day, so like that's already a given. And we have that list of who is going to be out there, who's not going to be out there, and who's going to be partial. So I don't think that we would show up saying, well, this guy's not out there today, so jump to this conclusion. I mean, this spring is definitely going to be much more about the younger guys,
Exactly.
if nothing else. It seems like it's always about development, but it's going to be even more so about the younger guys this spring, it seems like.
And, Brian NY, last comment he made in the chat, new defensive coordinator needs reps. Like, I don't know. I still find that important because even if you're not practicing, you have to find ways to communicate, build trust with one another, build comfortability within one another. And so, like, for that reason, it's like I would want, like, the whole defense, especially maybe like Drake Bowen, etc., to get comfortable with their new defensive coordinator and be out there at spring practice. So just my thoughts.
Like last spring, they worked on, I believe it was the dime package that they worked on a lot, like a lot of that kind of stuff, different sub packages and that kind of thing. But that was with a defensive coordinator who'd been around for 3 years. Now you've got a first-year defensive coordinator coming in. And so there's going to be a lot of, he doesn't have the familiarity with those guys like you're talking about. I mean, and it's a good point, Mike. He says nobody knows how to handle these practices. Nobody's played 16 games before. So it's all, I mean, that's
basically it.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And they're playing to the safe side of things. And I don't blame them for that because you essentially played an NFL regular season schedule. And like Mike says, nobody's ever done that before. Decaf says, what are the chances they eventually cancel the blue gold game? I mean, I don't even think it's the blue gold game, that's the issue. It's just when you go this deep into the playoffs, you've just got more wear and tear on these bodies that they haven't,
And they played for a national championship not even 2 months ago.
Right. Exactly.
And it's crazy to think about that they have to go, like, how do you go from the ultimate high of a national championship to the grind of spring practice? Like, it's hard to think about. And again, I think it shows that football is year round. It's not just the season and the games and the playoff. It's a year round 20, every day of the week obligation.
By the way, Decaf also says I've got the Olivia Miles look going. I don't know about that, but definitely black. So let's talk about a couple specific players. Notre Dame athletic trainer Rob Hunt says quarterback CJ Carr is going to be a full participant in spring practices after dealing with an elbow injury for much of last fall. He is completely recovered now, according to Hunt today. Scale of 1 to 10. How important is Carr's presence this spring?
I mean, it's got to be a 10 out of 10 when you're the kind of the young gun fighting for the spot. And, depending on who you ask, a lot of people think is the guy who's going to end up being the starting quarterback. I think it's incredibly important for him to be there. And I think, some of the stuff that we saw last season with Riley Leonard and his limited availability in the spring and, kind of into the fall as well, probably came back to hurt him or bite him to a degree. So in terms of, being there, it's highly important. And then also when you're a quarterback, it's, about leadership. And so you have to establish yourself as a leader on the team as well. And I think the number one way to be a leader is to be in the trenches with everyone every day at practice, working out, whatever it might be.
I mean, I think some of the most important reps, no matter what's going on with who's at the other positions, are these quarterbacks, because you didn't bring in a veteran, and now it is either going to be Steve Angeli, CJ Carr, or Kenny Minchie in, whatever order that you want to put them in. So, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's a 10 out of 10. And like there are very few wide receivers who are going to be limited based on the list that we've got. And again, we'll go through that here in a moment. So this is I mean, there's a quarterback competition going on. So no matter what, for CJ Carr to get out there on the field and be next to Steve Angeli and next to Kenny Minchie, and for all of them to be able to take their reps, it's hugely important. And obviously, the fact that we were still getting questions, even though CJ Carr was going through warm-ups in the national championship game, in the Orange Bowl, and the Sugar, like he was out there with the team in full uniform and doing the same warm-ups that everybody else was after he had the elbow in the season. And we kept getting questions about, well, just how healthy is he? Is he going to be ready to go? So, I mean, that is the absolute most important thing, is that the elbow is healthy. You know, they worked through it late in the season, and he's ready to go now. So vastly important for him to be able to be out there and to compete for the starting job. And you know, again, like based on what this spring schedule is going to look like, I think it's pretty safe to say that there's not going to be any declarations made by the end of spring. This is something that is likely going to trickle into fall training camp as well. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Hunt says there was never any thought of Jeremiyah Love needing surgery on his knee, which limited him during Notre Dame's playoff run.
It's highly relieving that a knee surgery was never in the consideration. And I think it's a lot of reassurance moving forward into next season. It sounds like he just kind of twisted up and, you know, needed basically time to heal it and not necessarily a surgery. But I think all Notre Dame fans were kind of holding their breath and really didn't know the extent of the injury. And was he just playing through it? How much was he playing through it? You know, that sort of thing. But to me, it's just so relieving to know that there was no actual structural or like ligament damage done. He just needed some time off to heal. And again, it gives me that reassurance that next season he's going to be back and even better, and potentially, you know, lead this team back into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. It is also counter to some of the initial reports that you might remember. You know, speaking of
that's
us,
so funny.
Yes,
how that came full circle.
Yes, exactly right. You might remember there were reports about, you know, this is going on, that is going on. It's going to mean this, and you know, there was talk about whether or not he was going to miss the Indiana game because of all these different things. So again, coming back to us having to answer for other people's reports and everything else, like, you know, sometimes you just got to tamp the brakes and you can't believe everything that you hear. Sometimes it takes a while, and I know that makes people nervous, but I mean, obviously for Jeremiyah Love's future and for the team, you know, he tweaked the knee. There was an injury to some extent. It obviously impacted him. He had to wear the brace, but you know, that's to be expected when you try to work through things and, you know, your team is playing in consequential football games. So thankfully there is no more extensive damage. And after some rest, Jeremiyah Love is going to be good to go. Looking forward to seeing him back out there on the field, full strength next spring. Okay, or next fall, I mean. So these are the players for Notre Dame who are going to be out this spring. Jordan Botelho with the knee, expected. Ashton Craig with the knee. Davian Dixon with a pec. Cooper Flanagan with an Achilles. Kahanu Kia with the knee. Chris Tarrick, foot and shoulder. Boubacar Traore with the knee. Chance Tucker with the knee. And Virginia Tech safety transfer Jalen Stroman had surgery for a clavicle. He's going to be limited for spring practice. But again, like when you're talking about the spring, I don't know how much benefit there is to, you know, trying to get a guy back out there in spring practice when you're already being pretty precautionary with a lot of things. So do you view any one of these injuries as more significant than the others, I guess, just for the spring itself?
Yeah, I think that there's a clear and obvious answer for this, and I think that there is one that's most significant, and that person or that player would be Boubacar Traore. And the reason I say Boubacar Traore is because of his youthfulness, how quickly he came onto the scene, and then also I just feel like defensive line has the biggest kind of question mark around it when you're looking at the totality of the defense. And so put all that together, or you combine all of that, his young talent, the need for standout defensive linemen now that some guys have kind of moved on, I think it's definitely, Boubacar Traore. And you could make the case for Jordan Botelho, but you know what Jordan Botelho is. He's been here for a while. He just needs to get back and be healthy. But when you think about how young and talented Boubacar is and how many, not holes there are on the defensive line, but they just need to build back up that depth.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction that I was leaning in, is just what you were saying. At least with Traore and Botelho, they were emerging, and you knew, especially with Botelho, because like you said, he's been around for as long as he has. Traore hasn't been around as long, but they were both showing themselves like they were fully capable type guys. So at least that's there. Stroman, I lean a little bit, even though I guess, they did say he'd be able to kind of run around and, and at least kind of go through, non-contact type stuff, but at least be able to, go through some on-field type stuff in a non-contact type situation. But I do think that any chance that you can get to have a guy who transfers in to go through the system with his new team and all that kind of stuff, you'd like to have him out there. So I think he would be my other one. Like, perfect world, you'd be able to have him out there. Anthony Knapp had surgery on his right ankle a couple days after the Orange Bowl, and he's more or less going to be day-to-day for the spring. Billy Schrouth is going to have cleanup procedure on his left ankle. He could be back by the end of the spring. So pretty much no Knapp or Schrouth or Ashton Craig, for that matter, this spring.
I don't want to say good, but let the young guys go to work.
Yeah, I mean, so what do you think it means for the future? Is it just, the offensive line specifically, is it just a chance again to get these young guys out there and get them as many reps as possible and see what they can do?
I do, and I think it's going to be largely beneficial because of some of the stuff that we saw last season. You never know. I think it's great to build up depth, and I think right now amongst the offensive line, all of the best talent is young. It's the freshmen and sophomores, and so I think that they need a lot of time to develop. And then you get to a point at the beginning of next season and fall camp, and that it's a good situation to be in when you have to piece together some of those veteran offensive linemen and those young and talented offensive linemen, and what that combination might look like. But I think it's great to give these young guys an opportunity so you can truly evaluate where they are and kind of come up with that cocktail of what the best offensive line will be for next season.
Yes, and it makes red jerseys, I think, even more important for quarterbacks to have on. They will be in red. How many other guys will be in red jerseys as a result of the fact you're going to have so many young offensive linemen out there? One thing to kind of keep an eye on, though, with all these young guys getting chances, like Joe Rudolph has a history of, like guys sort of emerging out of nowhere. So I think someone's going to kind of stand out this spring.
Gerby Lambert.
Hey, I mean, it's a chance for Gerby Lambert. It's a chance, like Charles Jagasaw has already shown himself, but like he's, there's just going to be so many more guys with reps out there. So yeah, I think it's going to be good for those young guys, but I will be kind of curious to see who of that group kind of emerges and maybe makes a name for himself. And does he all of a sudden become an option going into fall training camp in July and August and whenever, camp happens to begin? It started in July the last couple of years. Brian, going back to the quarterbacks, no declarations, but does Carr pass Angeli on the depth chart this spring?
I think so.
I mean, I think most of us are leaning in that direction.
I think people just bring this up so it can start a little controversy.
I mean,
the chat gets fired up.
Pretty sure the coaches in their mind know what the depth chart is, like what that actually looks like. And, again, like how they split up the reps this spring. I mean, you're already going to be divvying reps to more guys anyway. So maybe that makes it even easier when you're splitting up reps with the quarterbacks.
I think they're going to give them all equal.
You think they will?
I don't think they want that burden of having to answer those questions because everyone's watching everything. And I don't think that they want to put
Are
pressure
they watching
on
everything?
people.
Again, we don't have that much.
Right. And so like that's what I was
viewing.
saying is because they have like this spring is most important to the three quarterbacks fighting for the starting quarterback position. And so I would say the biggest advantage for Notre Dame not allowing the media is they simply just don't want the questions every day of who's ahead. Is Carr doing better today? Is Minchie doing better today? Because everyone wants them to name a starter in the spring, but it's never going to happen. Well, and they're going to overanalyze every rep that was taken in the spring by the quarterbacks.
And the other thing that I didn't mention is even though the practice availability that we're going to have is going to be fairly limited, we are still going to have all the interviews with the assistant coaches and players and stuff like that. And they're going to, like, if the schedule, I'm not going to say what specific day, but if the schedule stays the way that they sent it out, Gino Guidugli and the quarterbacks are going to talk pretty early in spring, so they don't have to answer to those things late in the spring.
It's by design.
So I think, no, exactly. That's my point. They're going to do it early. They can talk about sort of what they need to accomplish in the spring and how they see themselves, and Gino can talk about it and all that kind of stuff. But they're not going to have to answer to how things are going late in the spring. So yeah, it's definitely by design. So Notre Dame also has individualized plans this spring for several players who had big workloads during the playoffs. Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Drake Bowen, Jalen Sneed, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, Jeremiyah Love, Emil Wagner, and Jaden Greathouse all fall into that category. So what do you make of this?
I make of this that these are, for lack of better terms, these are our studs. Like these are our
they're all
guys.
Starters.
They played a
Emil
lot
Wagner
of reps.
played more snaps than anybody last year.
Right, and they played a ton of reps. They played more games than anyone else has ever played in a college football season. And there's no reason to risk losing them in something like spring practice. And so, if you feel like, and the thing is too, is just because they're not physically practicing doesn't mean that they still don't have the opportunity to mentor and teach, which is almost just as powerful as practicing itself, right? Because if you have the knowledge to teach or mentor, that means you have a full understanding of what's going on. And so I think that's going to be a big role for a lot of these guys this spring is even though they're not practicing, they'll still be there and they'll basically be like a teacher's assistant to the coach or the position coach, right? So yeah. There's still lots to be gained. And just because they're not physically practicing doesn't mean that they're necessarily losing out on anything. But I would rather give them more recovery time and have them more explosive, stronger, faster in the fall than wasting reps in the spring. It's like driving around in a car for no reason. You're just wasting miles and tread on your tires when you could coming off a long season, of course, right? Like that's the backbone of this whole situation. No one has ever played as many games as Notre Dame has played in a college football season before. And so how you
except for Ohio State.
And so how you navigate that is a new kind of realm in college football. And so I don't mind being on the precautionary side and letting someone like Jeremiyah Love let that knee fully recover.
Yeah, I mean these are all starters, obviously, and all this is going to do is because again, spring is more experimental anyway, and you always use spring to at least some extent to give younger guys more looks, and all this does is add to that. Like, what more do you need to see from Leonard Moore and Christian Gray in the spring? Specifically, what you need to see from them is what happens in training camp, because obviously they're still going to be around going through summer workouts and all that kind of stuff. But like, you need to see, like, this gives them a great opportunity to find out about what they have in terms of depth. Now, again, Chance Tucker is on that list of guys who aren't going to be able to play, which is unfortunate for him because that would give him, an opportunity to get more reps. But in all these different cases, all it's going to do is give them more of an opportunity to see what they've got behind these guys and give them all very valuable reps. Josh is saying 9 injuries heading into spring camp, but Tyler, as he says, only 2 were from last season, though, and that's exactly right. Like, these are all, predominantly guys who were injured last season and still haven't fully recovered from some of those, and some of them were obviously injured during the college football playoff push and need an opportunity to recover as well. So, nothing I don't think, to get, too worked up about based on where they are right now. So, new Notre Dame general manager talked today as well. And here's something he had to say.
And here to tell me the significance of March 17th, St. Patty's Day, on the football programs, on our recruiting program. Like, what's the significance of that day? Pot of Gold Day. So Pot of Gold Day obviously is where we extend offers to the class of 2027. And I think that's a really cool thing, right? I think a lot of places they have their, they send offers all throughout the year. I think Pot of Gold Day is a unique experience. So we made an experience out of the whole thing. And I just want to point out that this place was the first place to do that. And I think it's the best place to do it. And I want y'all to remember that March 17th, St. Patty's Day, belongs to the Irish. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
I mean, literally, it belongs to the Irish, Jess.
Yeah, I love that. And to me, it's a awesome tradition, or it's a fun tradition, or it's like this new tradition that's naturally come about, and it just kind of all makes sense and falls into place with where, some of these signings are at, and St. Patrick's Day and Pot of Gold. I just think it is so advantageous for Notre Dame to play on it as much as possible, because, for maybe people in the chat or listening later on, to them, it's just like, who cares, but like the kids love this stuff. The more you can do to interact and make it feel personal, and that they're in on this unique one-of-one experience that they can't get anywhere else and no other school can offer, it just naturally brings them back to Notre Dame more and more of like, that's the place I want to be, look at what they're doing that is so unique or different than what everyone else is doing. And so I love that the new GM did his homework. He came in, he said, you know what, like, we're keeping that because St. Patrick's Day is for the Irish.
Trojans don't have their own holiday on the calendar, right?
Right.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, who else has something like this that is so unique? Nobody. The answer is nobody. And so it's, of course you're going to keep it going forward. So like you said, it's awesome that he recognizes that, and they're going to keep going forward with that as well.
I'd love to get a gold bar or something at the end of the day. Gold a token or something,
Mad that you're not going to get your own gold bar.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. Notre Dame women's basketball begins ACC tournament play on Friday. It would be blank if they don't win the ACC tournament.
So I have to go with the word disappointment. And I got into a little bit of this on Tuesday during the women's basketball mailbag. And, they tied or had a share of the regular season ACC championship. And it largely came back down to the last week of action. And you can say that, Notre Dame kind of choked to a degree, right? And or maybe not even choked, just didn't play their best basketball really when they needed to finish off the regular season. And so if you double down on that and you also lose the ACC tournament, I find that to be a disappointment, because this is a team that has national championship aspirations. You have 3 first-round draft picks on your roster. Really, you have 4. I mean, more than that. I mean,
right,
3 draft like this year.
Hidalgo's going to be once she finishes. Yeah,
right. Hidalgo's going to. So you really have 4 first-round players on your roster right now, and I just think that, and you could obviously make the argument that they have one of the best, guard courts in the entire country as well. And so you put all of that together in terms of expectations, where they were during the season, winning 19 in a row, just kind of falling short. And then if they continue to sputter and spin their wheels going into the big tournament, NCAA tournament, I just think they'd be a disappointment. I think they need to get hot and stay hot and ride this thing through the NCAA tournament. And I think that starts tomorrow against, I believe, Cal.
Two things. They need to get some momentum generated again. Like it started gradually against Louisville when they closed the regular season on Sunday, but they need to get that built back up again. So that is so important this weekend, the opportunity to have 3 games, 3 days, and the opportunity to close things out with a championship and go back into the NCAA tournament with some momentum on your side. If they don't win the tournament, obviously it's not the end of the world,
right?
But there's no chance that they can have a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Like at this point, they're being projected as a number 2 seed, and just where they are in the rankings and everything, like they're going to be a 2 seed if they don't win the ACC tournament. That is their only ticket back into being a number 1 seed. So like that is the biggest thing is that opportunity to be a number 1 seed again. They won't be a number 1 seed if they don't win the NCAA tournament. So they need to get that momentum back and do that. As Decaf said, and as you just said, looks like they'll be playing Cal. They're actually in a commercial break right now. Cal, the last time I looked, was up on Virginia by like 25 points in the 3rd quarter. Josh, I don't know if you came in late, but we literally just a few minutes ago ran through the whole list of all the players that you were listing off in terms of, who's available, who's not, and all that kind of stuff. So we did go through that. Andre says, do you care about the number 1 seed or do you care about a championship? Well, they go hand in hand. There's a reason you want the best possible seed because theoretically, like if you're the number 1 seed, you go through a number 4 seed as opposed to a 2 or 3 seed on the way to getting to the Final Four. I mean, obviously in theory, you have to beat everybody in front of you, but the number 1 seed theoretically sets you up for the better path to get to the Final Four and have a chance to win the national championship. I get what you're saying, but again, there's a reason they seed this thing out, and that's why, if at all possible, you want a number 1 seed.
So the thing is what got you? If Notre Dame gets a number 1 seed, what got you there? It's winning the ACC tournament. And like you said, it's gaining momentum and regaining that heat or hotness at the right time. And so the number 1 seed isn't do or die, but if they could get a number 1 seed, it would kind of feel like they've righted the ship back to center, basically.
Like they've kind of reaccomplished something.
Right. They've recalibrated and gotten back on track. And would give us more confidence in terms of this run that we all know that they're capable of in the NCAA tournament. And so not only that, but I think you also have to factor in a lot of what you were saying. There's a reason why you want to be the number 1. You have the easiest path theoretically to the national championship, or to at least clear your bracket, your side or your region of the bracket at the end of the day. So yes, it's not 100% detrimental, but the things that kind of go into why you got that 1 seed and then what could come off of it, I think is important.
No, exactly. And, again, like I don't think that they've ever lacked for any confidence or anything like that. Just, they hit a speed bump over the course of a couple of games and, teams hit them with a specific mode of attack and things worked in there, and like even this weekend, I feel like it's good. The 2 teams that beat Notre Dame in the conference are on the same side of the bracket together. So like in this instance, maybe it's not the worst thing, like if they would have been the number 1 seed, they would have been on the side of the bracket with one of those 2 teams. They would have been on the side of the bracket with Florida State instead of NC State, but as it turns out, those 2 teams, NC State and Florida State, are on the same side of the bracket. I heard him talking on the ACC network today that Tanaya Latson, the Florida State player who's leading the nation in scoring and who was part of Florida State knocking off Notre Dame last week, like she's ticked off, I guess, that Hannah Hidalgo is the ACC's player of the year. Well, okay. I get that. But like, as I apply that to Notre Dame, I think that if there's any silver lining to come out of where Notre Dame is and losing those 2 games, I think maybe it puts like more of a chip on their shoulders now and kind of gives them a little bit of extra, motivational oomph as they head into this postseason right now. As Neil Ivey was saying when we were getting ready to get on the plane yesterday, everybody's 0-0 right now. We're 0-0 right now. Reset, new season begins tomorrow. And as of right now, Cal is up by 20 on Virginia. So looking more and more like it's going to be the Cal Golden Bears. So Bill Simmons said on his podcast this week that it's a potentially dangerous thing for the Raiders to have Tom Brady involved in evaluating and picking the next quarterback for the franchise, because great players don't always make the best evaluators of talent. Simmons says, quote, "They think they're seeing things that other people don't see, and it's not actually rational," end quote. Do you buy or sell that, Jess?
I sell this, and I'm a big Bill Simmons fan. This might be one of his worst takes of all time, in my opinion. I just think it's complete hot garbage. We're talking about the greatest, most
Before you get into your
quarterback.
spiel, I disagree with you. So you continue, and then I'll come in with old man talk and see where we meet.
There's maybe a reason you and Bill are on the same page. No, I just think what this boils down to is Tom Brady was obviously, in my opinion, the greatest quarterback of all time. Whether or not Patrick Mahomes catches him, it's a completely different conversation right now. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback. Not only is Tom Brady the greatest quarterback, but since retirement, he's still fully in football. He's still evaluating teams. He's still evaluating players. And you hear him often talk about kind of the mindset or the way that you went about, I guess you could say, training an NFL quarterback when he was in the league, and kind of where it's at now in terms of these guys get in the league and they're just kind of thrown to the wolves. Like, you're a starter instantly. You're expected to start instantly. When Tom Brady came into the league, you're going to sit down, you're going to learn, and you're going to have some time to develop, essentially, right? And so I guess what I'm getting at here is I just truly believe that no one knows more about the quarterback position than Tom Brady. And I know there is sometimes a gray line of,
but there can also be a different standard that might not be completely realistic because of the fact that you're Tom Brady or Joe Montana.
And
or
I
Dan
think he
Marino,
understands that, though,
to
a degree. I don't think he's holding everyone to the same expectations of what he is or used to be. But I think there's certain intangible things that you can say as a quarterback that's going to project well, or that's something that I can see is going to be lead to a lasting quarterback in the NFL. And so I don't know, just from a perspective of no one has played more snaps and had more success than Tom Brady at the quarterback level. I think he's in like the 95th percentile, maybe even 99th percentile of knowing what it takes to be a really successful quarterback.
But as Decaf says, and I agree with this, ask Michael Jordan how like all the things you just said about Tom Brady also apply to Michael Jordan.
But the thing about Michael Jordan is he couldn't commit to it. He had other things. I don't think he was disciplined enough to stay away from extracurriculars in his life. Tom Brady wants to be in football.
But Tom Brady is already splitting his time between being a football owner and being a TV broadcaster. So he's got one foot in and one, he's got a foot in different arenas. And Michael Hahn brings up another one who is on my list, John Elway. Like, John Elway didn't get it right in Colorado. Like, I think that the Bo Nix is much more about Sean Payton than John Elway. Like, the only quarterback that John Elway ever hit on was after Peyton Manning had neck surgery with the Colts, and John Elway said, well, let's, what do we got to lose? Let's bring him in. And Peyton obviously gets him to a couple of Super Bowls and help him win one. I just think, and I agree with what Bill Simmons is saying, and some of these guys he uses examples as well. I just think it's one thing to be a great player with great talent, but it's another thing to be a great talent evaluator, because again, great players just have a different gear and a different drive that 99% of everyone else just don't have. There are a reason these guys are in the Hall of Fame. It's a lot of it comes from the internal drive that they had to go along with the talent that they had as well. Wayne Gretzky, another example, arguably the greatest hockey player of all time, or at least one of the greatest hockey players of all time. Never made the playoffs as a coach when he coached in the NFL. Magic Johnson, obviously, great player. He tried to coach as well. Didn't work out for him. So I just think that, like, it doesn't mean that it can't work. And, and is worth saying that Bill Simmons obviously is a Patriots fan. So, like, he was a huge Tom Brady fan from his playing days. But, like, look at rank and file who have been, like, Bill Belichick was not was not a great player in his time. By and large, when you look at the guys who have made the best head coaches and the best, general managers, front office type guys, none of them have been great players. So I agree with I'm buying what Simmons is saying. I like, it is not a lock guarantee that what happened, maybe Brady proves him wrong and proves everybody else wrong who maybe don't believe in it. But I do think that there's something to what he's saying. Like the greatest players, look at Larry Bird. Like, what did Larry Bird has coached. He's been an executive. He's had good teams, never had great teams before he finally hung it up. So I think there's something to it.
And I get that. And I understand what you're saying, but I think the way I'm kind of thinking about this is, at the end of the day, if I had to pick Tom Brady or the other guy, I'm willing to roll the dice on Tom
more
Brady.
People are going to go with Tom Brady because he's Tom Brady. But he's going to have to prove, like, this is a big decision coming up for the Raiders with just, with what exactly does happen. And obviously the Raiders have been down for a long time. They've got Tom Brady, and obviously they think that there's something to Tom Brady who can help kind of drag them out of what's been a couple decades long irrelevance. In the time that the Patriots have been down, Brady went out and won his 7 Super Bowls. So, all right, speaking of quarterbacks, the Vikings did not put the franchise tag on Sam Darnold, meaning that the quarterback is a free agent. If you're a team in need of a quarterback, do you want Darnold?
I'm hesitant, but I'm willing to give him a shot if I'm desperate. And the reason why I'm hesitant is because Kevin O'Connell, in my opinion, is a quarterback whisperer. He's got like a degree in quarterback freaking whispering, because
exactly.
My man has won games with Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, Joshua Dobbs. Heck, he won a game with a quarterback with the name Jaron Hall. You probably couldn't even tell me who Jaron Hall is, but he found a way to win some games, right?
Josh Dobbs went from irrelevant Arizona Cardinals backup to winning games for the Vikings when he was
exactly
there.
And so, that's my issue with O'Connell on the flip side, is I think he finds ways to win games, but he can't find ways to win the big games. Like, he can get through the regular season and find ways to kind of, play chess with you and get past you. But when it comes to the playoffs and it's good on good, like that Vikings team that went 14-2 or whatever that one year, and then just got blown out in the first round. I think they got beat by the Giants.
Are you talking?
Well, two times that's happened then, because they did it a couple of years ago when they.
That's right. When the Giants were in the playoffs. That's
exactly.
right.
The Giants
in Dable's first season. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so O'Connell is definitely a regular season quarterback whisperer, but I think that he ran into a wall of Sam Darnold wasn't good enough to get them over the hump come playoff time. And so you combine that all together, I don't think Sam Darnold's going to get you anywhere in the playoffs. I think he actually probably maxed out his ceiling because of Kevin O'Connell in the regular season. Unless I'm desperate, he's kind of a middle of the road average quarterback to me.
Yeah. And it sucks for Darnold because, he had, 80% of his 90% of his season, he was great. He's leading them to all these wins and into the playoffs and everything else. He had 2 bad weeks at the end of the season, and now everyone's willing to just write him off. And even the Vikings, obviously they had a business decision to make because of J.J. McCarthy, who got injured and gave Darnold the opportunity. But the problem I would have if I'm, the Raiders or the Giants, I think those are 2 prime options, in terms of where Darnold could go and start. If I'm either one of those teams, I know the Giants think that they're closer in terms of what they've got on their roster because they've got Neighbors and some other guys. And, it's like a couple of good offensive linemen. Michael Hahn is saying, nope. And Michael Hahn is our resident New York Giants fan here. He obviously got to see him with the New York Jets, but I agree. Like wherever he goes, he's not going to have Kevin O'Connell, and he's not going to have Justin Jefferson, and he's not going to have Jordan Addison. Like those 3 factors were huge factors, and even who was in the backfield with him as well. They were and having Hawkinson. Like those were all factors in why Darnold was able to have the season that he had this year. So like he's gonna command north of $20 million. That's still a lot of money, even though it's not franchise quarterback money that's going out in the $45-50 million range right now. That's still a huge amount of money to give a quarterback who's only had 1 good year and essentially, was Cinderella and had the slipper fall off at the end of the season. So it sucks for Sam Darnold, but I would have a hard time. But I think you said, the key word, how desperate are you? Like if you're Cleveland needs a quarterback right now. Would you want Darnold?
I think there's Joe Flacco, then they could win with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like that might make sense because Stefanski actually comes from that same tree. Like like we've talked about it before. Stefanski is basically won with anybody not named Deshaun Watson. So maybe you do give it a shot if you're Cleveland. If I'm the other teams, though, I would have to think long and hard about it.
Speaking of, though,
the Giants are desperate right now, though, themselves. Like that front office is trying to save their jobs going into this offseason.
They've been desperate ever since they drafted Daniel Jones.
What were you going to say? I cut you off there.
Did you see Cleveland, I guess, has paid off majority of Watson's contract already?
Oh, really? No, I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, they've gotten a lot of the fully guaranteed money off, and they restructured it, and they've basically freed up around $40 million because of this. And so, there's been rumors about Myles Garrett being traded. There's been rumors about, do you take Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders with the number 2 overall pick? So Cleveland's got a lot of decisions to make. And can we honestly say that the Deshaun Watson experience was one of the biggest flops in terms of just what they paid and what they got and what he turned into?
Does he get a job again?
No,
I don't think so either.
It's just not worth the baggage that comes with it.
Yeah.
Even if he could be a backup.
Yeah. I think his time is.
So Jerry Jones will naturally ask him to be their backup.
Don't even go there. You made it all the way to the end. I think you said Cowboys twice. Well, I guess you didn't technically say Cowboys, but you referenced them twice. All right. A lot of great stuff today. As of right now, Cal is up by 21 points on Virginia in the 4th quarter. So looking like that's going to be Notre Dame's opponent Friday, 5 o'clock Eastern time at the ACC tournament in Greensboro. Andre, if you're still out there, I look forward to seeing you this weekend, assuming you are still coming to town to Greensboro. I know you said you were having a hard time finding tickets for Saturday. I don't know.
Just give him your.
Is that you or
pass.
me?
That's you. Just give him your media pass.
I might get in trouble if I do that. Might also not be able to get in. All right. Andre said he's still going to try. Have a great weekend. Jesse and Vince will be with you tomorrow for a rapid fire show. So looking forward to seeing what they've got coming up for you tomorrow. I will talk to you later. Hit the like button before you leave. IB Nation Sports Talk.